I grew up in the 80s and went to college in the 90s, all of which times were the growth of the personal computer and then the growth of the internet, all within a few decades. This is just a few stories about some of the memories growing up during that time period.
Yeah. So my computer training actually goes back a really long way when I was in elementary school.
I was the generation where typing classes were beginning to be replaced with computer classes.
I just happened to have found some notes and took a picture of them. This is basic programming right here. I used a mainframe computer in a computer class that I took at the community college when I was in 5th or 6th grade. And that was my user number. You had to include the comma. Whenever we logged into the mainframe, we had to put our user number and our password, and we had to capitalize the password just like it looks on the back of the notebook that I had. Isn't that cool?
In these days, an Apple IIe were always in our classrooms at school. They had a little light indicator on the keyboard that would always burn really hot, and we would always put our finger on it and see how long we could take the heat. Some of my cooler friends had computers at their house, and you could hook them up to your TV, like the infamous Commodore 64. I remember going to a department store called Rose's in the Cleveland Mall, and in the early days of computers going out to the masses, they would sell these machines inside of department stores. I remember this one because of the cassette tape interface. I also remember going into a mall toy store and seeing the historically significant Next computer that Steve Jobs came out with. I was super interested. I ignored all the toys, and like Ralphie in the Red Ryder BB gun, I put all my asking powers behind that computer. But then my dad saw the price tag, so we directly walked out and we went to the arcade, and my dad called it blowing a dollar because you put your dollar in and got your tokens, and that dollar was gone in a matter of moments, especially if you played Dragon's Lair.
Look, I did some research and I found out that it was probably not the Next computer. It could have been the Lisa, but I remember the price tag was so stinking big, it was thousands of dollars, and my dad wasn't beginning to think about spending that kind of money on a computer.
Last story I can think of, when I was a junior in high school, my principal got a Mac computer at the school, and he let me test drive it one day instead of going to class.
That is actually the first computer that I ever owned. My dad gave me his old version of it, and this was late 80s model, mid to late 80s model, because it was probably old by the time he got it. But by the time he passed it on to me, it was pretty much unuseful. You had to boot this thing from a disk to get it going. It was quite an interesting machine, but it was a portable computer.
This was my first really useful computer. I got it in 1993 or so. It was a Canon InnovaBook, a 486. Pentium chips were already out by then, but back then you usually bought just behind the curve of the latest and greatest. My first laptop definitely wasn't the latest and greatest. It didn't even have a color screen to it. This picture is not the exact one, but this is a later version, but it looked roughly like this one. I had a copy of Doom 2 on it that I would play in between writing papers during my grad school time. Could you imagine playing that on a little black and white 9-inch screen with a little built-in roller mouse? The internet was just starting to become something that average people were beginning to use. The summer I graduated college was the first time I ever accessed the internet on my own. It was at a friend's house using an AOL free disk set. You had to have a machine fast enough, a modem that could push it out, and most of the times they were external modems that you would have to plug in to your phone line from your house. Before big companies started hosting email servers in exchange for your personal information, the most common way to have email was through your local ISP. My first one was ConkNet down in Key West, Florida, so my first email was bwhite@conk.net. Another thing that was coming to being in the mid-90s was a predecessor of text messaging that was called PAC technology. It was a method of sending short, little tweet-sized messages through a ham radio signal. My pop took me to a ham radio meeting in Riverdale, Georgia, And most everybody in the club was interested in that new technology, but Pop was just interested in talking because he was old school. Other technologies that didn't last very long, but I was happy to use it for a short time. Napster. A kid who grew up with records and a big fan of music, when you could get a hold of countless bootlegs in one place, that was a dream that was not bound to last. Since my university used PCs primarily, I ended up using a PC through the 90s until my wife and I went to Ukraine in 2005. It was then that I spent more time troubleshooting than I did operating the computer. So I switched in 2009 to the Apple world, and I've since worked for the company and doing customer service with Apple Care with iOS and Mac. And that computer is still running today. Interestingly and coincidentally, if I had matched the purchase cost of my MacBook Pro back in 2009 when I bought it, with the equal amount of Apple stock, that stock would now be worth $25,000. I just looked it up. Yeah, so I should probably get off this computer and try to get out there and make up for some of the lost profits. So I hope you enjoy the video.